Hey, where the heck have you been? Have you been on the IL? How's your September been? Have you been drinking and fighting for Shohei Ohtani's 50-50 ball at the Recess Lounge in the Lone Depot outfield? Supposedly, it's the guy who who stole the ball from someone else. I don't know. He turned down either $300,000 or $500,000 from the Dodgers because they wanted that very historic Shohei Ohtani ball. He had 50 home runs, stole 50 bases, and he just walked away. I don't know how much that dude expects to get at auction. That made me think, like anybody else, how much would you want for a historic ball like that? Because remember, when Shohei Ohtani hit the home run in Dodger Stadium, I believe it was in August, to reach 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases, the guy who caught it in the left field, I believe it was in Dodger Stadium, the Dodgers didn't offer him anything, if I remember. And Shohei Ohtani was like, nah, I don't want the ball, whatever. I don't think Shohei Ohtani really cares about the ball. I think he just wants to win a World Series. And the fact that he does these insane milestones is great. But I don't think the Dodgers fought too hard for that ball back. Seriously, what would you want for a historic ball like that? And I thought, would it just take an all-you-can-eat ticket at Dodger Stadium on a random Tuesday afternoon game and free parking for that? No, that's just being silly. You know, other balls have gotten $1 million. I think Aaron Judge's ball that when he hit 62 home runs like 3 seasons ago, that ball at an auction got like $1 or $1.5 million. Even if this goes to auction, I don't see this dude getting $1 million. I probably would have given the Dodgers the ball if they offered me 800,000 plus 2 lifetime season tickets in the lower bowl at Dodger Stadium, free parking, and obviously taking a picture with Shohei Ohtani, getting a signed bat, signed jersey, and another random signed ball. For 800,000 plus a lifetime 2 season tickets at Dodger Stadium and free parking because, LA is along with like Miami, the car capital of the world, not at least of the US. I think genuinely I would give it up for that. And right now the Dodgers are fighting with the Philadelphia Phillies for the number 1 seed in the National League playoff race. And the Dodgers, as most of us know, are not originally from Los Angeles. They're from Brooklyn. But there's also another team that left New York City 70 plus years ago. My next guest's childhood team were the New York Giants. I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Lee Lowenfish, a baseball author. Dr. Lowenfish, welcome to Last Call Baseball.
Nice to be here with you, Dorian.
Who do you think is the baseball version of Chet Baker?
Wow. I've never been asked that. I did a jazz newsletter in the 1990s and grew up with classical music, but who's the baseball version of Chet Baker? Wow. Well, perhaps Jazzism is on his way, but he doesn't have a great uh, track record yet with the Yankees, although he's made the world of difference to them in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
But in terms of the long history, I sort of in a way Glenn Burke, although his is a more tragic story, having AIDS and then not and being isolated and ostracized. But in terms of the history of baseball, well, Rube Waddell comes to mind. Had a great career, but faded out and died very young. Where did that question come from? You're into jazz too, Dorian, I guess,
Yes.
right?
Well, yes and no. Number one, that I'm surprised about the Jazz Chisholm because it seems, even though as you had mentioned, he's been with the Yankees, I think for like 2 months, and he seems to have a greater impact with the Yankees than he did when he was the air quote face of the franchise when he was with the Miami Marlins, and he was and everyone was in uproar when he was the cover boy of that the video game, the show or something like that. I don't know if you remember. I think it was like last year. But I read that you were a jazz aficionado, and I have a friend who loves jazz. He always invites me out to, jazz night, whatever, and I always say no. I like jazz in the sense of some songs by like like old jazz, like Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald. I love Ella Fitzgerald because I love the rawness of what she says and it's almost she has like no inhibitions in her lyrics.
Well, you're thinking more of Billie Holiday, right? Because I mean,
Oh
Ella was,
yes, I'm sorry, Billy. Yes, you're. I'm sorry, I'm getting
yeah,
the ladies mixed up.
yeah,
Yes, Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday is the one.
yeah.
She was yeah, and all these people like Chet Baker. Obviously, he had his drug issues, and so did Billie Holiday, and
Charlie Parker, most
right.
dramatically. But no, that's a fact. Before we end, I may come up with a. It's the question reminds me of when I briefly interviewed Dwight Evans in his last year with a bad Oriole team, and I asked Dwight Evans, "Baseball is a spiritual game, isn't it?" And he paused for a moment. He says, "Man, I don't get asked that question very often." And this one is really a first because a Chet Baker of baseball would be someone who was very good, very mellow, and yet very, very tormented. So, in a possible way, Jimmy Pearsall. That's not quite in. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Frischberg's work, who I got to know.
No.
He wrote Van Lingo Mungo, and he grew up in Minneapolis. And was he one of his last albums was "I Want to Be a Sideman." He was really he loved the Jazz Cats, but he wrote a musical on Christy Mathewson that only some songs were ever published. And he also wrote Dodger Blue for the Dodgers. And he knew Carmen Fanzone out there. Now, Carmen Fanzone perhaps is the best jazz musician who reached the major leagues with the Cubs, but he was behind Ron Santo. So he never really had a chance, but he was also a trumpeter, you know.
Yeah,
And
just like Chet Baker. And the other thing is, I think it would have to be someone who's so good at such a precocious age as Chet Baker was when he was with the Trump, when he was, I guess, introduced to the trumpet. I thought about one of Jazz Chisholm's now teammate, like Juan Soto, minus the drug issue. That's a whole
yeah,
because this kid was almost touched by a higher being of like you are going to be one of the best baseball players in the world, and he has been since he was like what 17, 18 years old when he came up to the majors with the Washington Nationals, and now he's setting the world on fire again with the
yeah.
with the Yankees.
I mean, I used to, because have been an Oriole fan for over 50 years, having taught down there in Baltimore, and also they used to beat the Yankees regularly. And last year they did, but this year, the big series next week ain't going to be a big series for the Orioles. It looks like. But I used to compare Mark Belanger's defense to Mozart. He was the Mozart of jazz of shortstops because he was so smooth and melodious, but he was also tough, And like Pepper Martin, decades before him, he evidently played without a jockstrap, just daring the opponent and
BMI.
daring the baseball. There's no bad hop with me around, baby. And I don't know. I happened to be watching the package last night, late at night, and Don Kessinger's grandson is a reserve for the Astros, and he saved the game. Machado hit a vicious two hopper up the middle, and somehow Kessinger got the bad hop and made the last out on a force at second. And he was only playing because Altuve got thrown out of the game for taking his sock off to tell the umpire that ball really hit me. And so he was thrown out of the game for, I don't know, the rule is you don't disrobe on the field. I mean, you see, this is what we love about baseball. All the stuff about money can't kill it, I think. I mean, there's so many stories. Now, September baseball is so intense if you haven't been there before. And October, even more, although at least October, there are more days off.
I love that you have such a incredible depth of just baseball, not just contemporary baseball, as in this season or the past few seasons, but just historically. Obviously, we'll get to in a minute about your published author of many books. You're originally from New York. How in the world do you go from? Well, I think your original team was the New York Giants, who are now the San Francisco Giants. But then how? What is that? What is that like having to almost being forced to change your allegiances because a team moves, because then you move for work, and now, as you had mentioned, you're a big Baltimore Orioles fan.
Well, it's a very good question, Dorian, and a lot comes from my father. My father was 44 years old when I was born in 1942, and that was pretty old for that age. And I grew up a block from Central Park, on the eighth floor, and on 58th and 7th. And there was no little league back then, and I didn't go to the park by myself. So I sublimated my desire to play into becoming an early nerd. I guess you'd call me that. I don't like to call the people running baseball now nerds, but there's so many of them, and they have undue control that maybe I'll have to and say, "Wake up, nerds!" In fact, I think one of my best blog sound bites, maybe my only one, was those drunk on analytics, sober up. Drunk on analytics, sober up. And you watch baseball now, and it's the people who rise to the occasion, the grinders, who, as Belanger used to, and what Kessinger did last night, you know, damn it, I'm going to make this out. I'm going to get this hit. And you watch what's happening now excruciatingly to the Orioles. They're having meetings with the hitting coaches, all of whom never really did much playing in the majors. Two of them, none at all. And we had great meetings. Well, then why aren't you hitting? I mean, the Times runs an article about the wonderful teaching that's going on in the Oriole farm system, bogusly called the greatest farm system in baseball today. Well, it isn't, and they're not hitting. And the problem is, and I was listening to Euclid on the Red Sox broadcast the other day, and he marveled. He says, they're taking pitches right down the middle of the plate. Why? Because they're thinking sequences. They've been to these meetings, and well, he can't pitch him. I'm looking for this quadrant. I'm looking for that quadrant, and they forget you want the meatball in the middle of the plate. And it's not just going on with the Orioles; it's going on all over baseball. But to come back to your question, I think Pat Mullen, rest in peace, was a big factor in me becoming a non-Yankee fan. I'm trying not to say hater because I respect. I mean, it's hard not to like Aaron Judge, who is really, and even Soto has welcomed the role of being a New York hero. But my father was a New York Giant fan. I picked that up from him because I wasn't a rebellious kid. And I remember this day, and this time I checked it out, though, and I went to Baseball Reference when I was one day short of being 7 years old. I'm sitting in the bleachers in left field with my father for a Tiger Yankee doubleheader, June 26, 1949. Yankees won the first game pretty handily, and there's a fan sitting next to me on the other side from my father. Kid, what are you rooting against the Yankees for? They always win. And I say to myself, well, he might have a point. Well, let's see what the second game brings. Vic Raschi gets knocked out in the second inning. Pat Mullen hits 3 home runs, many of them down to short porch at Yankee Stadium. And I think he had maybe 80 in his whole career. And that's how it started. And I didn't change. I remember calling my father when I was 9 years old when Bobby Thompson hit the home run. I was listening to Red Barber. I was not listening to Russ Hodges. And of course, if you saw the last blog, I almost should have titled it, if Russ Hodges were alive today or lived to see the change and the expansion of baseball, says, the Giants win the pennant 4 times and the Dodgers win the wild card. And now there's 3 wild cards. So it's not, and I'm sure every player in the game now, certainly the ones who are not just want to win so badly each day, are thinking, well, look at the Rangers last year and look at the Diamondbacks, and we can do it. It does take something away, accepting the drama of the game when so much is on the line and the leaves are turned into brown. It does make it a very, very special period. So that's part of the explanation. I didn't rebel against my father. He died fairly young, and I saw part of his mental decline, I think, was signified when he didn't really express his feelings when the Giants and Dodgers moved to the West Coast. I was a teenager then, and he never talked about it. And we did go to Casey Stengel and the Mets on occasion, but he didn't like Stengel because he remembers Stengel as the Yankee manager that kept winning. And one of my breaks from him, my father, is that I've come to have a great appreciation for what Stengel did. I mean, and both as a player. I mean, the famous story of Mantle before World Series. Stengel says to Mantle, "Well, I hit a ball out there, and Mantle, 22 years old, looks at him and says, 'You played here, Casey?' And then the wonderful story that I have in the new book, Baseball Endangered Species, about the baseball scouting. One of the reasons he might have gotten the job, the thing that put him over the top in the eyes of co-owner Del Webb, is that after he interviews in Oakland before the 1949 season, and the car is heading to the airport, and Stengel asks the driver to stop because he sees a game going on, and he can't stop going to a game and also instructing the players. And one of the things that he was very good as a Yankee manager is that they had that pre-spring training uh, um, instructional league, or in just and that's where they learned. And that's where I'm one of those people who feel spring training is the greatest part of the season, and I've been to it a few times, and so that love of baseball never really left me. And then while I was being a serious grad student in Madison in the 60s, and also putting myself on the line during the anti-Vietnam period, I would always go to games. I went to games in Wrigley Field. I went to games Comiskey. Later on, with my Baltimore friends, we went to Wrigley and Comiskey on the same day on a Saturday afternoon. And also I saw the White Sox in Milwaukee when they played there, when the White Sox were threatening to leave. And then when I got to Baltimore, there was a team just a couple of miles from where I lived. And I was a Met fan in the 69. I wasn't against the Orioles, but I was happy for the Mets. Was at game 2 when Al Weiss got the big hit and Koosman almost threw a no-hitter. And then by 1970, it's been all Orioles all the times. And I've been up, there have been ups and a lot of downs. And then there were ups until my birthday again this year, which turns out to be the year that Rushman, the day that Adley Rushman was hitting 300, and now he's barely above 250. And he's not the only one. So, one of my favorite lines, if you read the plug, Dorian, is every season is different. And now I have to even modify that. Every half season is different. And you have to, it's a long haul. What can you say? I mean, mathematically, they're supposedly going to make the playoffs, but I've never felt this low about my team. And yet, if you're a fan, as I've told many people, this is what you buy into. You're buying into the romance, which is ups and downs. And I always think of something, the line of General Patton, who your audience or what might remember as George C. Scott in the movie of the same name. When he tells the folks before D-Day, he says, "Well, you're here with Patton. You're not shoveling shit in Louisiana." So that's what baseball fans, real fans, have to remember. It's better to have the passion and the pain than just sit on the sidelines.
Yeah, the that you mentioned about the analytical nerds or what have you. I remember when you had mentioned that, I think it was Theo Epstein had said when he was doing some self-reflection a few years ago of like, I keep hiring the same people that look like me that have the same background, namely the guys that go to, Princeton or Yale and have that stats econ background. And they just see black and white. They don't see team chemistry. They don't see someone who that the qualitative parts of it that you can't put on, like the desire to do something. I don't know how that push and pull, that almost battle within baseball is still ongoing. And You mentioned the Orioles this year. I don't watch too many Orioles games, but I do see the scores. And you're right. The last 2 3 weeks, I remember the Orioles even until about 2 weeks ago, they were like going back and forth with the Yankees for that number the lead of the American League East division. And now it's like every single game they're losing. I think they lost like 10 or 12 to nothing a few days
Well,
ago.
it was a 4-0 game until the ninth inning, and Kimbrel gave up 6 runs, and they cut him today finally. But they're bringing back Brian Baker, who is not exactly. It's really sooner or later. And I tell people, and I tell myself, but I'm not. It ain't working on me right now. That you got to look at the micro, not the macro. Uh, but boy, Elias the Ailey and his pal there, Maydal, who comes out of NASA, working with astronauts, and how they could deal with being in outer space in a capsule, and then he becomes a big expert at trying to beat the system in Las Vegas. And he's interviewed during the broadcast last week, and he does say when Luhnow hired him, and they banished Jeff Luhnow, who in St. Louis, and then they all went to the Astros. Maydal said he was maybe the fourth or sixth analytic person in the entire industry. Now they're over 500. And in the words of Michael Fishman, the Yankee honcho, we're all looking for the new best thing. And that's where Chisholm, uh, with his Bahama background and never had any experience playing third base, but having great instincts as an athlete, it's made a world of difference to the Yankees, and you just need those grinders. And look at Iglesias for the Mets, who was with the Orioles, and he's been with a lot of teams. And I mean, what he's done in terms of his singing and getting the whole team to sing after one of his hits,
Oh, that's
and
right, because he has that song that's his walk-up song. I've been to Citi Field when they play his song. Yeah.
I was at the last two Oriole Yankee Met games, which were in mid-August. So what's going on with the Orioles has been going on really since the All-Star game, and they got the Dominguez gave up the two walk-off homers in that series, one to Alvarez and one to the immortal Jesse Winker, who was another character who came with a questionable pedigree, but he wants to win, and he's making a hard game look easier, and probably even more important, he's loosening up the other people. I mean, you just need those people. And I mean, I go back with the Orioles till the 1977. They lose Jackson to Reggie to free agency. They lose Rich to the Angels, Baylor to the Angels, and Rich Dower, who replaces Rich, comes in and is sort of 1 for 20 to begin the season. So they put in switch hitting, unheralded Billy Smith, who gets 8 hits or so in a doubleheader in Texas. The next thing, they wind up winning 97 games. They finished third to the Yankees and Red Sox, but it went down to the last weekend. And that's when you really fall in love with a team. And now I don't know. I mean, they got two pitchers who should give you good innings, and even Kramer, who it's hard for people of my ethnic background because I'm Jewish. I mean, Kramer is the only Israeli American dual citizen in baseball history. I mean, his parents live in Israel, but they grew up in Stockton, California. And he's been pitching well, and he wants to pitch deep. And the best line in all baseball is the best bullpen is a starter who goes 7 innings. And
Yeah,
now
that's a good
Hinch,
one.
who got suspended by Manfred because of his role in the Houston sign stealing uh, scandal, he's bringing the Tigers along with about 2 or 3 innings for 4 or 5 pitchers every day, which is so abhorrent to me, but they're playing great baseball.
Yeah, they might
And
even sneak in and take that last wild card
oh,
spot from
absolutely.
I think
They're
the
playing
Twins. I
the
think their
Orioles
last
this
one.
weekend. I don't know if they're playing this afternoon or tonight, but I mean, this is the fascinating thing about September baseball. It is different because tomorrow, the great line I heard from Bobby Valentine, and I think he picked it up in the Dodger organization because so much comes from Branch Rickey, who I did the big bio of. But tomorrow is your best friend. But when there are not many tomorrows ahead, and you've had some painful yesterday losses, it becomes harder and harder. But that's where I think there's always going to be baseball, because the drama within every game is so intense and real, and there's nothing comparable really into other sports.
The great thing about baseball is there's like a set marker where there's hope. The season ends, the season's about to begin, like you said, and there's always hope. But I will say this about the Baltimore Orioles, that when you go back, if you're able to, if you were able to get into your DeLorean and go back, what, 4 or 5 years, when the Orioles were the worst baseball franchise, losing over 100 games, and they had Peter Angelo's, rest in peace. He's in the great baseball diamond in the sky. But now, in the medium term, the Orioles are set up to be hopefully the class of the American League, because now you have a new owner, David Rubenstein, along with his partners. This is a man from Maryland. He's a proud Baltimorean, and I know Michael Bloomberg is part of that team, and Cal Ripken Jr. When these men have money and they want to spend it in the club, I see big problems ahead for teams like the Toronto Blue Jays, the Boston Red Sox, the Houston Astros. And this is as you had mentioned, maybe not totally believing the farm system. I mean, some of these young players that are struggling right now came from the farm system, and unfortunately, they're struggling at the wrong time, which is in September.
And you see, Tori and I, again, when you go macro, you really, I love the line that Santander about players are paid to be in the moment, and that's one of the problems with the Orioles right now, because they are trying to do too much. But Santander is an agent and free agent, and Corbin Burns is a free agent. It seems to me they got to keep one of them, but there's going to be a lot of bidders. And what's happened to Holiday, especially, and now Colby Mayo, I mean, their failure to do anything right now, I mean, it's not inconceivable that that's going to be a cross that's going to be very hard to overcome. There were rumors, and I'm not sure how true they were, but I don't think they were totally unfounded. There were rumors at the trade deadline that they were talking to the Tigers about Holiday for Skubal. And I mean, but the kid's been rushed. He made a big error in Fenway in extra innings when we had maybe the last lead we've had, and then it became a walk off for O'Neill.
But at the same time, these young kids are getting blooded, and in a year, in 6 months, it may be completely different. In 3 weeks, it may be different if they should make it to the playoffs. But I believe in these youngsters and this franchise as a whole, and it's going to be awesome to watch as a baseball fan.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, I really do. I mean, and I hate being around negative people. In fact, I dedicated the new book, the scouting book, to every scout who wrote in his report what a player can do, not what he can't. Because Branch Rickey had a line. In fact, here, even though this is audio, you can see it. He was 80 years old when this came out, this picture, and he was trying to start the Continental League, or actually at this time it failed, but it didn't get off the ground. But he was asked at 77 what his greatest thrill in baseball was, and he said it hasn't happened yet. So
Hopeful.
And then the other one I'm really proud of, although it's really hard to find now, is the pitching book I did with Seaver, which a lot of young pitchers have used. And I mean, Seaver was really old guard, but he had such intelligence about the craft, and he said it on that Met staff that he was designed to go throw 135 pitches and go for a complete game every time he went out. He really believed in the 5-man rotation. Koosman, he said, was strong enough to go 145, Nolan 155 or more, And of course, when Gil Hodges died, that was his greatest advocate. And so I mean, I'm not a Met fan, but I'm certainly not against the Mets. And when I saw how they beat the Orioles and how they're beating a lot of teams, they're bouncing back. They really have a fighting chance to make some noise. In fact, I wouldn't rule out, and I don't think it would be good for baseball, but I wouldn't rule out another Subway Series here.
Yeah.
But it's only that what we're talking here on the 18th. So we still have, and although it's
2 weeks
hard to
left.
believe, got
Yeah.
11 days to the end of the season.
Yeah. The with
Yeah,
we
yeah.
we're sprinkling hope throughout the conversation. With hope comes either change or improvement. If we were to make Dr. Lowenfish the new Major League Baseball commissioner, what's one or two things that you would change for the betterment of the game in your mind?
Well, I think one thing I would go back to 154 games, or even ideally to 140, or even in baseball history. You can't. My first book, and is a wonderful story, whether we may not have time to. The Imperfect Diamond was written right before the big strike of '81, and it came out in '80, so we missed it by a year. What Marvin Miller did for baseball was long overdue, but he and the players didn't know when to stop, and the owners were stupid enough to get into courts where they could never really win. I mean, just look at the stuff that's going on in football now. I mean, that woman judge in California who might throw out all the NIL stuff because the boosters are not getting their rights to give as much money to the players. I mean, there's a wonderful quote in the book in the Perfect Diamond where Calvin Griffiths, who inherited the team from his uncle and who adopted him, Clark Griffiths. Calvin Griffiths said, "Most people get lawyers to get them out of trouble. Our lawyers get us into trouble." So so what I would do, I would go back, I would shorten the regular season. As commissioner, I would try to make sure you have owners who really try to compete and are well funded enough. I've thought a lot about this, Dorian, but I don't think about it that often because it ain't going to happen. I would. Um, I don't mind the changes with speeding up the game, but I certainly, and I plugged in the last post about Whit Merrifield, who's on a player owner committee, to do something about these injuries. I mean, though one in terms of people coming up to the big leagues who are not ready and they're just throwing 100 miles an hour, and
The
let's
LA
hope they
Angels are,
spring.
are Exhibit A when they just rush guys after
Yeah,
being drafted 2 weeks ago.
yeah. So in a theoretical world, it would be nice to have 32 teams, so you really have four 8-team leagues. But given the quality of play, I perish to the thought of what baseball would look like with the 52 other new major
No,
leaguers.
yeah, I completely agree with you that there should be a scaling back of the regular season because it would make it more important.
Yeah,
And also maybe not a salary floor, but something, there has to be some kind of clause where an owner, if you aren't doing XYZ, whatever the parameters are, you're going to have to cough up and sell the team because ultimately we understand there's winners. This is sports, winners and losers. Like there will always be a last place team. But if you're always in last place, you are the problem. It's
yeah.
not
Well,
just random statistics.
and there has been talk. I mean, again, theoretical. I mean, never anything serious, and it's less likely to happen now because there has been improvement this year in teams like the Tigers, even the Reds. Uh, the Washington, with that scout-led group of Mike Rizzo, is improving. Uh, but the European system is relegation. But that would be very hard to.
That's something that we probably couldn't do when everyone's trying to value their franchises at anywhere between 1 and $8 billion. I don't see that happening, unfortunately.
I would also put in, uh, I would decree a quiet half inning or two at the ballpark. I mean, I don't have hearing aids. I probably should, but if I went to a ball game, I would turn them off. They're getting louder, and you can't converse to anybody these
Oh,
days.
Dr. Lowenfish, I would strongly suggest for you not to go to an NBA game because
Oh, I
if
know.
you think
I've
baseball
stopped. I've
stadiums are
stopped.
bad, the basket it's they don't allow you to breathe with fire coming out with the noise. It's
Mhm.
basketball is the worst of all the major sports, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the those are some of those ideas, but uh, and it might be it's a good question to end your show with because Manfred says he's leaving by 29, after the Olympics and after supposedly expansion and a brand new a stadium in Las Vegas, which a lot of people doubt will happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but in this interim, these are very good questions, to talk about. And it's too bad Branch Ricky's Continental League did not come into fruition. For in fact, when the National Hockey League expanded by six teams from the old six, they were inspired in part by Ricky's Continental League, which never played a game, but seven of the eight teams that were in the planned Continental League have been now in the majors. Houston, Colorado, Miami, Tampa, uh, Denver, Toronto, uh, Montreal. There's the only one that didn't get it was Buffalo, which was a shame because and the part of the reason was that the TV in Buffalo was so affected by Toronto and Cleveland. Now, in the current talk of expansion, I know the Portland people, and they got a lot of big bucks, and they even have a site plan, but they're just not on the radar for baseball right now.
Right.
And so, uh, and I, but so uh, it's not a. I'm not dwelling too much on that subject. I also, though, what I don't want to see is that robot ump come in at home plate, because I mean, the game is so personal. That's what we love about the game. It's personal, it's unpredictable. And the more you let machines, take over, the more it isn't what it used to be. But
Dr. Lowenfish, we can't write books. We can't play baseball. We can't enjoy life, as you had said, because baseball is life without nutrition, without food. What's some places that you like in your local neighborhood city when it comes to food, coffee, drink that you enjoy going to?
well, I've become a near addict of the of a what would you call it? It's called it's a sandwich place, a bagel place, but it's also a Chinese restaurant after 11:30 in the morning. And before the pandemic, I'm not making this up, and this is on 113th and Broadway, the southwest corner, just a couple of blocks from Columbia, the campus. And before the pandemic, it was known as Nussbaum and Wu. It closed shortly, briefly. Now it's back and it's known as Wu and Nussbaum. And they have these bagel sandwiches, choice of whole wheat, which is the best for me in terms of diet, and egg, which is sensational. And I like the Clinton Street, which is turkey, Swiss cheese, lettuce, tomato, bacon. Oh, a lot of bacon. But they have chicken salad. They have whitefish. That I like the coffee. Now it's not that crowded either. I can often sit outside. I mean, but it does get crowded at lunchtime. Popular Columbia place. Now I don't go to Absolute Bagels that often, but that's the place 6 blocks south on the east side of Broadway where they line up around the corner, cash only for those that this Thai family makes. Uh,
So
um, yeah. So the other, this is a subject dear to my heart, and it's probably good you're not doing video because it's added a fair amount of weight. Not a a shockingly fair amount, but enough. Ellington's on 105th Broadway is another more favorite place. Again, on the this time on the northwest side, and they have taco appetizers, uh, and a good chicken, uh, and it's a very pleasant place. It was the old Birdland, or the second Birdland jazz club, but it's a big roomy place, outdoor seating if the weather is nice. So I'm very partial to my what I would guess call my upper West Side
Yeah,
place.
definitely. And if those of you, let me make it clear, we're specifically talking about New York City, Manhattan, and obviously the Upper West Side is, I guess that's close to Hamilton, almost close to Hamilton Heights. Not quite though, not that quite
No,
north,
no, Hamilton Heights about a little bit.
140th or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then some very interesting stuff up there with the Jumel Mansion Museum. And then there's Edgecombe. You see, I went to the Polo Grounds as a kid. Uh, I have not. I thought I saw Johnny Antonelli pitch the year before Pat Mullen hit the 3 home runs, but I checked that out. He didn't pitch, but I did see the Giants. That was my first game because my father was a dermatologist and he had National League umpires as patients. So whenever Bay Pinelli was in town, we would get tickets. In fact, I got to know Bay Pinelli, who was his really he. The story is now this I don't remember, but he and his wife Mabel uh, would come in. He became a supervisor of umpires after he retired. His last game behind home plate was Don Larson's perfect game. I never talked to him about that. I mean, and I didn't see him after he left retired from the supervisor's job. But the strike three call to Mitchell is somewhat controversial. The strike two call was so bad that Mitchell should have been swinging at strike three. But so that some of the scouts I write about thought that was the greatest moment in baseball, that perfect game in the World Series, because that's what it meant when there were only 16 teams and
Right.
they met once. I mean, that's another thing I would do as commissioner. I mean, I would cut down on the interleague games, especially in September. I mean, I mentioned it in the current blog. I mean, the Yankees wind the season up first with the Orioles and then the Pirates.
But then,
And
but then the Yankees might see Paul Skeens though. I mean, who
well,
wants to miss that?
that's probably not going to happen. But I doubt that. I doubt the Pirates would pitch him. I mean, you see, I would almost bet, and that's another thing we haven't talked about, how young people betting is going to keep a lot of teams afloat. Because but I would doubt, even if the Orioles were still in the race, that the Pirates would pitch Paul Skeens. I mean, only belatedly did they talk about he should pitch in September to just know how it feels. But I
Right.
mean, I've heard people who are not directly impossible in the game, but I follow a lot of college baseball. I went to Columbia. We have a very good team, although we've not done well in the last two playoffs, but we're almost always in contention. And I was talking to the parent of a Princeton pitcher this past season, and he and his son his career is over because of an injury. And he's making an idle comment, but it's not from a necessarily uninformed guy about, well, they're going to hold Skeens to 100 pitches, but his arm will blow out in 3 years. I mean, how do we know that? And you see, Skeens is a very interesting guy because, I mean, Lord Almighty, talk about a promotable guy. I mean, he really didn't want to leave the Air Force, and a competitor. I mean, I hope he pitches. I mean, he certainly wouldn't pitch if the game is meaningless. And actually, home field advantage might still be on the line for the Yankees, so it wouldn't be meaningless for them. I would hope he would pitch if the game was meaningful, but
Right.
I'm
Not for the Pirates.
it'll be interesting to watch, to say the least.
I will say this as the newly self-anointed, self-appointed senior advisor to Commissioner Lowenfish. I'm going to say no to banning or stripping back or pulling back on the interleague play because Mike Trout. There's been so many baseball fans that have not been able to see Mike Trout pre interleague massive interleague play because you'll have what if you're in Cleveland, you're a big fan you might have seen Shohei Ohtani when he was with the Angels, but now you would have to go to the World Series to see Shohei Ohtani in person. And I think that takes away from these stars where you can pay your $1,500, whatever ticket you can afford to go see a stars like Ronald Acuna Jr., Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts. And that's the reason I'm all for interleague play, but maybe, as you said, maybe not so heavy in September, but I'm all for interleague play sprinkled throughout the season.
Well, initially it started as a period, just a period. In fact, there were owners, but not enough in that push for it. In fact, I think it was the National League. Well, the National League was pushing for the DH during the 30s because they wanted to compete with Babe Ruth. But there was talk about interleague play. I mean, Bill Vack spoke in my class in Baltimore. Now we're talking 40 years ago. And he said that on his father's deathbed, he had two words of advice to his son. One was beware of Westbrook Pegler and push interleague play. Now, Pegler became one of these real isolationists, was once a liberal in the 20s, and a big syndicated journalist, so. But no, it's great
I'll have to
talking
look
to
him up.
you, Dorian,
Yeah.
because I mean, baseball has been so much a part of my life, and I hate the negativism that I feel now about the Orioles, but and funny tonight, I'll be able to watch the first hour of the game, but there's an interview with one of my heroes, Ken Singleton, coming up on Sabre at 7:30. So they'll have to do it without me right now.
Well,
So
fingers crossed. There are bright months and seasons ahead immediately, not like in 10 years, like in the
yeah,
next year or two for the Orioles, maybe even this year, because if they get in and they have a hot 4 or 5 weeks, championship parade down,
yeah.
what is it, Utah Street, whatever it's called in Baltimore?
Utah Street is near
Correct.
the ballpark. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Dr. Lowenfish, I want to thank you for your time, and please let us know. And you had mentioned, by the way, you were I said published author with like 5 books. Let us know where we can find your books, where we can read your thoughts and your
well, yeah,
love of hope and baseball.
LeeLowenfish.com is where the books, links to my books, the three that are in print come through the University of Nebraska Press, and that's UNLEDU, UNL.edu, www.unl.edu. Available also through Amazon, and the ones that are in print are the third edition of The Imperfect Diamond: A History of Baseball's Labor Wars. Uh, then the current one, Baseball's Endangered Species: A History of Scouting, with Tom Greenway on the cover, uh, uh, when he was a Yankee scout. He signed Rex Barney for the uh, for the Dodgers, and also Calvin Coolidge, Julius Caesar, Tuskahoma McGlish for the Dodgers. But then, of course, he signed Mantle, and he signed Hank Bauer, and he was really a great scout who evidently was on the payroll even through the darker years. Never left his hometown of Willard, Missouri. And then the Jim Branch Rickey book, which probably has had the greatest circulation, Baseball's Ferocious Gentleman. So, and I did Seaver's pitching book many years ago, and that's a little harder to find, but from Hearst Books. So I did a book with the baseball trainers also in between on fitness, and I'm still in touch with some of the trainers who are important. I watched, I hope Santander stays with the Orioles, and I hope he starts getting doubles as well as homers. But right now, the drought is absolutely 1 through 26.
I want to thank Dr. Lowenfish for joining us this week. Not only am I back after a 3-week stint on the IL, I'm also back to drinking beer, even though I said last month that I'm cutting out beer, and I am. But at the same time, you have to finish off the beer you have in the fridge. I have or most of it is in my tummy right now, Belgian White from Golden Road Brewing in Los Angeles, California. Golden Road Brewing partnered up or is partially owned by Anheuser-Busch, but you can't find that information on their website because who really wants to be partnered up with? Because normally, I'm not a fan of Anheuser-Busch because they produce crappy domestic beer. Secondly, I don't know. By the way, this is a good beer. The Golden Road Brewing is a good beer because it wasn't actually originated from Anheuser-Busch. And I don't know if the fan in Lone Depot Park was drinking Golden Road Brewing when he caught Shohei Ohtani's 50-50 ball. Because I don't think you can find Golden Road Brewing at Lone Depot Park. But you can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Give us a follow, like, subscribe, buy a t-shirt if you want. And if you don't want, thanks for listening to Last Call Baseball. Be great and get home safe.